Massive protests over COVID lockdowns, vague threats from China at the G20, and the FBI's national security concerns over TikTok. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll tell you more at the end. So, you know who really loves tracking people? The Chinese Communist Party. They're especially keeping an eye out for anyone who has COVID, might have COVID, or lives in the same city as anyone who has COVID. They even have Big Brother drones flying around to intimidate people. In the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou, they found 3,700 COVID cases through their mass testing campaign. Granted, the vast majority of those people had no symptoms, and all those cases are still less than a 20th of 1% of the city's population. But rules are rules, so authorities placed the entire city of 13 million people under lockdown last week. Turns out that was a stupid thing to do. Not just because it's a bazooka to kill a mosquito type situation, but because people in Guangzhou revolted. It started with people singing about loving freedom. By the way, that song about loving freedom is a popular Hong Kong protest song, so I bet the Communist Party loved that. Then people tore down the COVID barricades that kept them inside their apartment buildings, and they destroyed COVID testing centers. I guess tearing down the tools of oppression looks different in the 2020s. But protesting COVID restrictions is bad. You're supposed to follow the rules. So authorities came out to teach people a lesson. You can hear what sounds like some kind of shot being fired. There are rumors that police may have shot at least one protester. It's not clear whether those rumors are true. There's also this footage of a protester in Guangzhou getting his neck stepped on. What makes this a big deal is that people in China have no right to protest. The consequences of protesting are severe, and yet the zero COVID policy is so awful that people are protesting anyway. Maybe they don't know how dangerous it is to protest until it's too late. If only the Communist Party taught people history instead of covering it up. And after the break, world leaders play nice with Xi Jinping at the G20. Welcome back. This week was the G20, an annual summit of leaders of the world's biggest economies. They met in Bali, Indonesia this year, where they planted trees together, because that's so in vogue right now. But what's even more important than pretending to care about the environment is that the G20 is a way for world leaders to meet with each other. Sometimes in the hallway, sometimes at parallel tables with flowers in between, because flowers make everything more festive. Even a new Cold War. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, of course, had a lot to talk about. They were hoping to press pause on the U.S.-China freefall. What does that mean? Well, the relationship has been getting worse ever since, I don't know, the Chinese regime signed a trade deal but then broke nearly all their promises. They covered up a deadly pandemic which has killed more than 1 million Americans. They keep supporting Russia despite the ongoing attacks on Ukraine. But on the bright side, Biden and Xi said they would resume climate cooperation, which Beijing had cut short after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan earlier this year. Great! So the Chinese regime has agreed to restart talks despite arbitrarily stopping talks when they got mad at the U.S. this summer. And just to prove that they're absolutely serious this time about continuing to lie, China is keeping plans to build lots more coal-fired power plants. Of course, there's only one thing the two sides definitely don't agree on. The U.S. doesn't want China to invade Taiwan, and China still wants to. At least 4 times in recent years, President Biden has said the U.S. would defend Taiwan if China attacks. In this week's meeting, Xi Jinping responded by saying things like, "History is the best textbook, so we should take history as a mirror and let it guide the future." What does that mean? Is it a threat? Which part of history do you plan to repeat? Or does the mirror mean you do it backwards? I'm confused. It would be a lot clearer if Xi Jinping was just like, "We're going to invade Taiwan, so neener, neener." But can Taiwan defeat an invading China? Yes. And I explain how in the latest episode of our new YouTube channel, Gamers Unbeaten. Yes, it's a real channel. Check it out. Link is below. Speaking of confrontations, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Xi Jinping informally in the hallway, while cameras from the Canadian press pool were rolling. It comes shortly after it was revealed that the Chinese Communist Party had repeatedly influenced Canadian politics, and Trudeau had accused China of aggressive election interference. Here's the snippet of that conversation, in which Xi seems to be accusing Trudeau of leaking their previous conversation to the press.
Everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper. That's not appropriate.
Xi goes on to say this to Trudeau in Mandarin: "If there was sincerity on your part, then we shall conduct our discussion with an attitude of mutual respect. Otherwise, there might be unpredictable consequences." Sounds kind of like a threat. But Trudeau didn't get the message because he cut off Xi's translator.
If there is sincerity on your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have to
Let's create the conditions first.
Well, at least they shook on it. While Western media saw this as Xi Jinping confronting, lecturing, and scolding Justin Trudeau, the Chinese regime says it was nothing of the sort. No criticism here. But the cherry on top of this whole thing is that as Xi Jinping walks away from Justin Trudeau, just after Xi walks off camera, you can actually hear him call Trudeau very naive in Mandarin. I'm sure he meant that as a compliment. French President Emmanuel Macron also met with Xi Jinping at the G20. And unlike Trudeau, Macron got a table. Macron talked to Xi Jinping about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And Macron told the press afterwards that he is convinced China can play a more important mediating role in the coming months. Yes, I'm sure China will get Russia to back off the invasion. That's totally something they want to do. Just like the way they want to stop using all those coal-fired power plants. I guess Macron is also very naive. Also this week, the UK's newest Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has ditched his predecessor's plan to classify China as a threat to UK security. I take it back about Macron. Sunak is very naive. And after the break, how a South Korean rugby match has put relations with China on thin ice. Welcome back. On Tuesday, FBI Director Christopher Wray spoke to Congress during a hearing on Homeland Security, and he said the FBI is extremely concerned about China's influence through TikTok. Remember, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, a Chinese company that, like every big Chinese company, has close ties with the Chinese Communist Party. Wray talked about several reasons the FBI is concerned about TikTok's threats to national security. Those include how it can compromise software on people's personal devices, collect data on millions of American users and send that data to China, and conduct influence operations, including political influence, by using its algorithms to push or hide certain videos. It's so bad that even Vox is saying maybe Trump was right about wanting to ban TikTok. We are living in the weirdest timeline. Speaking of China collecting data, the U.S. Justice Department has charged 3 Americans with illegally sending military data to China. They've also been charged with illegally providing the U.S. Department of Defense with Chinese-made parts for military equipment. If convicted, the 3 defendants face up to 20 years in prison for illegally sending data to China, plus additional years for smuggling, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. Meanwhile, things are much better up north. Canadian police have charged a researcher at Hydro-Quebec with spying for China. Hydro-Quebec is Canada's biggest electric utility. They not only provide power to Canada, but also to parts of New York and New England. The defendant is being charged with illegally obtaining trade secrets and sending them to China. He could face up to 10 years in prison. Now, while those crimes are all pretty serious from an American perspective, they're minor compared to the enormous crime committed this week in South Korea. During the Asia Rugby 7 series, while the teams were lining up for the Hong Kong versus South Korea match, organizers attempted to play Hong Kong's national anthem, as would be customary for a visiting team. Only what South Korea played was Glory to Hong Kong. It sounds like a national anthem, but it was actually written as a protest anthem during the 2019 Hong Kong protests. Hong Kong doesn't actually have its own national anthem because Hong Kong is not a country. It belongs to the People's Republic of China forever. So, okay, the rugby organizers should have played China's national anthem, which, to be fair, they did after realizing their mistake. The head of Asia Rugby said the problem was that there were 2 interns responsible for the music, and they supposedly pressed play on the wrong file. But that's not enough to appease Cthulhu. Hong Kong's chief executive now says police are looking into whether the incident was a violation of the Hong Kong national security law. The way the national security law is written, anyone who violates China's extremely vague rules, like subverting state power, can be charged criminally even if they're not in Hong Kong. The national security law applies to the entire world. For example, that clip I showed you, I have now violated the national security law. I guess I won't be going back to Hong Kong anytime soon. And this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. Your name, your email, your home address, your credit card info, and lots more. That's why I signed up for Incogni. When I signed up in February this year, I discovered that there were 76 data brokers that potentially had my private information. Since then, that number has grown to 134. And that means companies are buying and selling my personal info. Obviously, there's the moral outrage, but the bigger problem is that these companies can be hacked, and my data can be stolen by random people, including hackers in China. Data breaches are on the rise this year, which means my personal information is at risk more than ever. Fortunately, Incogni is working hard to force these companies to delete my data. Less than 9 months after signing up, Incogni had already gotten my details removed from 58 of these data brokers, with 76 more in progress. And I didn't actually have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code UNCENSORED will get 20% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.